I want to say that my morning show is so crazy and off the hook, y'all. It is so crazy. That's all I can say. We are a radio station that plays gospel music, but I interview people. Like a couple of weeks ago, I did Billy D. Williams was in town. He did a play. I interviewed Billy D. Williams. From Billy D. Williams to the Globetrotters to you name it, the mayor, the governor, you name it, they're there. And we always have a good time. But this individual I'm getting ready to bring before you came to my studios earlier this week, and we had the best time. And the conversation was so heated about paternity fraud. The lines never stopped ringing. They were calling on the request line. People were calling on the regular line. They were so interested in what he had to say. I would like right now to introduce to you, for those who may not know him, and just to present to you all that do know him, none other than the founder of PaternityFraud.com, ParentalPaternityFraud.com, none other than Mr. Carnell Smith. All right, let's give him a hand, Candy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I didn't say that you had to give me any money. I just said good afternoon. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, the New Jersey chapter of Citizens Against Paternity Fraud in the person of Sue and Patrick McCarthy. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for the great city of Trenton allowing us to come here. And most of all, this is a fabulous hotel, right?
Yes, it is.
As Brother Eric Gambrell was just saying, my name's Carnell Smith. I'm the founder of the U.S. Citizens Against Paternity Fraud. And I'm one of those people who found themselves in an unfortunate situation that required me to test the limits of the judicial system. And how many of you understand that freedom is not free?
Yeah.
And what they call justice is not necessarily justice. And much to many of our people who find out when they get into the family court, horrors of horrors is that the family court is not a court of law. It is called a court of equity. But you know, if you think of equity, you start thinking of things should be in balance, right, just, and fair. But when it comes to paternity fraud, and I'm going to define the term for you, you find out the system is not just, the system is not fair, the system has anything but balance. However, when it comes to the cash, they have a very clear perspective on pay or go to jail.
Ooh.
Paternity fraud. First of all, paternity in itself is a lawsuit that is primarily brought by a mother against a party who is alleged or presumed to be the natural father, or as we like to think, the biological father. Now, presumed and alleged is an unproven thing. Unfortunately, the system really doesn't care once they have someone's name on the paper. Now, there are two categories of paternity fraud. I forgot to give the definition for the fraud part. Some of the people try to say that it's not fraud. The deliberate concealment of a material fact is fraud. Look in any of your law books, go look in the Black's Law Dictionary, go look in Parsons Law, take your pick in any one that you want to use to define the term, and I say that if you ask a mother, were you aware that you had relations with more than one male? And her answer would be yes. Did you inform the person that you told that I'm pregnant and the baby is yours? Did you tell him there was someone else that could be the baby's father? No. Were you intending to tell him? No. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard the defined definition of paternity fraud. Now, there are two categories of fraud. Number one, there is marital paternity fraud. Sometimes when people ask the question, why does little Joey look like the milkman? Well, the obvious answer is because the milkman is little Joey's daddy. And while the marital man, the husband man, was away from home, whether he was gone to work or whether he was out fighting for our country. And I say fighting for our country in the person of the many men who are in the United States Armed Forces in military as in Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. And if I miss some, just give me a little time. I'll find some victims there too. These are officers. These are married men. These are single men. The second category of men who find themselves in this situation are called non-marital paternity fraud victims, of which I find myself in that category. Now, we say we want men to be responsible. We say we want men to take care of their children. You will not hear me, as the leader of U.S. Citizens Against Paternity Fraud, say that I'm against people taking care of their children. I fully support people taking care of their children, and that includes every child that they formally and legally adopt. That includes any children that are born that are theirs. And I use the emphasis on theirs. But now, since we don't make grandmothers pay child support for children that they offer care and support for, we don't make uncles pay child support for children that they step in sometimes and they fulfill the male role model role. Do you understand that if we made that a dangerous thing for people to get involved in helping with children, that you would almost have a category of single moms would be almost untouchable, as in guys would be afraid to date a single mother? Is that really what we want? But with the non-marital paternity fraud, a guy does not even have to have a relationship with the mother. He does not even have to know the mother. And the looks on your faces says, oh, get out of here. There's no way that could happen. And right here in this great state of New Jersey, there's a man who was found to be the father by a technique which they call default judgment. Default judgment means that somebody can put your name down that you do not know, that you did not touch, that you did not have a relationship with, and the court says, but you didn't come to the first hearing. Well, we haven't found one person who has contacted us yet that says, I got the notice before they started taking my money. Quite the contrary. The process servers have actually been cross-examined. We've taken depositions of some of the process servers, and they couldn't even name the correct house that they had been to. They couldn't even tell the right colors of the house that they'd been to. So quite naturally, these men who are declared legal fathers by the stroke of a pen, how do you defend a lawsuit that you've never gotten a notice on? And it could happen without the Assembly Bill 2374 passing here. It could happen to your son, your friend, and heck, I wouldn't be so bold as to say, I wouldn't want this to happen to my enemy. Because once he's in the family court system, he will pay with his life to get out. Well, I won't belay this point right now, but I'm going to make a transition in to bring up the presentation before you today to talk about paternity fraud. So you're going to see that there are many dynamics to this issue. Some you've heard of, but more importantly today, we're going to bring some information to you that you've not heard in the mainstream media. And many of our opponents at this point now have switched their position. Some of them are now saying, maybe we ought to do DNA testing at birth. And on our side, saying we would not have a problem with that. Well, how can paternity fraud be exposed? How can it be stopped? The best interests of the child. Who can help to get paternity fraud legislation passed? And when can the help be given? Those are the kind of things we're going to answer today. And before you leave today, I want you to think about something that happens when you go to court. And they say, do you name so-and-so? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And that's supposed to be the basis of our American justice system. However, when you get to the family court, it's not justice and it's not equal. Right about now, I'd like to bring up one of the founders of the American Coalition of Fathers and Children in the person of Dianna Thompson. It's on. Open it on.
Okay, great, all right. First of all, I want to thank U.S. Citizens Against Paternity Fraud for inviting me today, and Carnell Smith for all his wonderful work in regards to paternity fraud. Should courts allow DNA testing to determine paternity in child support cases? Yes. DNA right now is being used to free death row inmates. We should also accept it in paternity cases. For years, our nation's courts have accepted DNA evidence as absolute proof of innocence to free not only death row inmates, but those wrongly convicted of robbery, rape, and other serious crimes. But currently, they are not accepting it as proof for paternity fraud victims. That in itself, I believe, is criminal. What many find astonishing is that unwed, divorced, and married men nationwide are forced by court order to pay child support for other men's children or face going to jail. There's actually been men that have been thrown in jail because they don't want to support someone else's children. There's something wrong with that, folks. Although this practice defies all common sense, DNA results proving non-paternity do not release these men from legally being declared fathers, and they are continuing to pay, oftentimes at the expense of their own biological children. I have had many fathers, in fact, I've been working on this issue, believe it or not, since 1993. When a woman came to me, she was very distraught and said shortly after she got married, another woman had claimed her husband was the father of her child. Two DNA tests proved otherwise. The child is not his. 10 years later, he's being made to pay child support. Their family has suffered greatly. He has a biological child that is actually going to be going to college in a few years. Well, was going to college. They can't send the child, his own child, to college because they're supporting someone else's child. They've paid over $40,000 in legal fees trying to get out of it because they have made this a calling, obviously, because it affects their lives and they feel it's so unjust. And also I ask you, how can a married couple of 10 years be denied even having their own children because they are so financially strapped supporting someone else's child? And to this day, the mother will still not tell who the real father is. She denies that the DNA tests work, that it has to be his child. And this is just very unjust. And I think that in America, married couples should be able to afford to have their own children, should not have to support someone else's child. Also, failure to recognize DNA testing deprives a child of a biological father and also denies a father of his constitutional right to be involved in a child's life. Oftentimes, paternity victims, they are actually the fathers, the biological fathers, they don't know they have a child out there that they could love, they could care for, they could support. So they're being denied too. And also, we hear all the time about, well, if paternity fraud legislation is passed, what about the children? These children are no longer going to be supported. But that actually isn't true, first of all, because they can find the biological parent. And also, what happens again with the biological children? We still have to get back to, there are biological children that are suffering. What about the child's medical history? That is a huge problem. There's medical implications here that are very serious. There's been children that have actually gotten, when I was in Michigan testifying on their paternity fraud bill with Carnell, there was a doctor, they were talking about a case where a parent gave bone marrow to a child that wasn't his. That child died a gruesome death as a result of this.
Wow.
Now, had the truth been known, this wouldn't have happened. So to say that this benefits children is really not correct at all. And also, another thing that I find astonishing, and I'm going to show you this here, is that if you look on the child support website about establishing paternity for your children, encouraging fathers to step up to the plate. Why? How will this benefit children? Well, paternity must be established before your children's birth certificate will show the name of the father. Well, yeah, it's kind of important to know who your father is before you can put him on the birth certificate. Medical history. If a child doesn't know their father, then they are denied their medical history. They're denied child support, Social Security, and inheritance. Your child may share a right to inherit property from his or her father's estate. Life insurance and U.S. military benefits. Well, if this is used to get men to establish paternity, why, once this paternity has been established and they're not the father, can't a father get out of paying it so they can find these important elements for children? Again, mind-boggling. But also, in regards to losing your medical history and heritage, there's another important element. What about in emergency situations? I used to work in a trauma center, and I know that every second counts. If a child goes in, needs a blood donor, then what happens oftentimes is parents opt to use, the biological parent's blood, obviously because of all the problems with AIDS and whatnot. Now, in this case, if a father goes and gives blood for the child, and then all of a sudden it doesn't match, do you know you lose important minutes that could be life-threatening for that child? All because we couldn't establish the truth from the very beginning. These things are just absolutely crazy. And again, if the child support enforcement is saying these items are so important, then why aren't they important to paternity fraud victims? Let's find the biological parents so the children can benefit from these areas. Oh, I guess my time's up. That's why she's I've been asked a lot in the media, why would a woman, especially a woman that is not affected by paternity fraud, be so passionate about this issue and be working on it for more than a decade? It's very easy. A few reasons. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I don't want to see this happening to my son someday. I think it hurts children. It hurts the fathers. It hurts the paternity fraud victims. And in a whole, it hurts society. And certainly we can do better than we have. I think that just as we can free innocent people in criminal cases, we certainly can do that for somebody that has a child support order. And I believe that paternity fraud is harmful to truth-minded individuals. I'm a person that believes in accountability and responsibility, and that is where we have gone wrong in this issue, because the only one being accountable and responsible is the victim who has done nothing. And most of all, I hope that you will join me and others in supporting paternity fraud legislation, not only here in New Jersey, but nationwide. Thank you.
Wait for an introduction from you, Carnell. All right, good afternoon. I want to thank all of you, and especially I would like to thank Patrick McCarthy at the New Jersey chapter of Citizens Against Paternity Fraud, and Carnell Smith for the U.S. Citizens Against Paternity Fraud. My name is Murray Davis. I am the founder and executive director of Dads of Michigan. We are, like Carnell's organization, an affiliate of the American Coalition for Fathers and Children, which is Dianna's organization. And as such, we are extremely involved and active in our state relative to the issues such as paternity fraud and other issues relative to parenting and shared parenting and co-parenting of children. What I'd like to indicate to you, and I apologize, I don't have any notes, but I'm going to try to follow my quickly assembled presentation to give you some very, very specific information. I'm going to address a couple of things because I am a victim of marital paternity fraud. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my situation, I'll briefly just tell you that after 18 years of marriage, and having 3 children born during my marriage, it was to my surprise at the event of in a divorce action to find that my 2 youngest children were not my own biological children. And in fact, it turns out that the natural father was my former best friend. So we can see that all of these situations affect all of us. And the irony about the whole thing, I'll share with you at the end, and why it's so important for the truth to be known at the very beginning. Because I'll tell you, my daughter, one of my daughters, who isn't my biological offspring, told me when I asked her what was the most important thing about our traumatic event that she was, if she had it to do all over again, she would want differently. You know what she said to the dad? She said, I would want the truth to be known in the very beginning. That's my own daughter, who was also a victim of this particular paternity fraud situation. Let me talk briefly about some of the headlines that we have across the country. And I'm not going to go into them, but this, if you just look at these headlines, these are only a small number of the headlines that appeared weekly in some periodical and some magazine across the United States. And it all talks and points to one particular thing, paternity fraud, a term that most people are really unfamiliar with. You'd be surprised how many people I ask, well, do you know what the meaning of paternity fraud is? And they give me this blank stare. But it simply boils down to one particular thing. It's telling the truth. It's really, when you boil right down to it, it's talking about telling the truth. Next, please. So what about paternity fraud? Dr. Carnell has been very good in giving a definition, and I just summarize it here on this particular point, but it also victimizes everybody, and not just men. I know many of the opponents and critics talk about this being a way for men to get out of paying child support. For crying out loud, most men that I know, in fact, men in our organization across the country that I've talked to, if they've had a relationship with a child, the last thing they want to do is sever that relationship, even if it turns out that they're not the biological parent. And then ironically, isn't it ironic that we can talk about big brothers and big sisters, and we can talk about other mentoring organizations and where they function quite naturally as a surrogate parent, but for some reason someone who's had an involvement with a child who is unfortunately not the biological parent is somehow prevented from doing that if in fact they don't want to be held, mandated, hostage to a child support order. I mean, this is the real ironic thing about how we twist things in this country oftentimes to our own benefit. Biological parents have an inherent obligation to support their children. I believe that totally. I believe that biological parents do, in fact, and most states, quite frankly, have laws that indicate that. There's nothing wrong with that. Biological parents are, in fact, responsible. But if you're not a biological parent, and unless you have voluntarily accept that responsibility, you shouldn't be held mandated hostage by a state. Gathering a complete family history, we've talked about that already. Dianna was very specific on how the important medical issues regarding paternity fraud affect the lives of these children. This is one thing we cannot afford to let go for any longer. And all persons have a right to know their personal medical history and gathering complete medical history for research and medical industry. These are all just common things that we should pay a particular attention to. So why does it exist? Well, very simple. State courts rely on something called the Lord's Mansfield Rule. And for those of you who are familiar with that, it's simply a 500-year-old English common law, or doctrine, if you will, that was done to help settle disputes of paternity when there was no technological way to determine accurate paternity. They had nothing like that 500 years ago in England. And up until about 20 years ago, we didn't either. So consequently, the courts here in the United States have relied primarily on this particular rule. Even though many states have outlawed it, the courts still, in fact, use it. The judges and those who are rendering these decisions and opinions still use it in their own opinions and rulings. They use the premise that if, in fact, a man that was, and I'll summarize it, I'm sorry I didn't define it earlier, but it really says in essence, if a child is born of the marriage, if the child is born during the marriage, then the child is an offspring of the marriage. Right. And basically it only has a couple of things that would prevent you from having to use that. In fact, if the man was out on the high seas for 10 years or something like, for 10 months or more, then obviously he couldn't have fathered the child, something like that. But that was the only exception that it had. So the courts within in this Lord's Mansfield doctrine simply said, okay, then if these are not the exact exceptions, then in fact, then you must be the father of their child because there was no medical way to prove otherwise. And that made sense then, all right? And so, interestingly enough, there are some other tenets to the Lord's Mansfield doctrine that we don't talk about, and that is, Lord's Mansfield said, oh, by the way, old common law English wanted to also say, what about property? What about children? What about wives? Did you know that the old English common law also used things like, you belong as a wife to your husband. As a child, you belong to the father. You are property. You are chattel. So consequently, I don't hear the opponents talking about that part of Old English common law. So you can't pick and choose what we want all the time. That states encourage only voluntary paternity establishment. Almost every state has some sort of voluntary paternity established. In other words, if a mother decides she is going to allege that a particular man is the father of her child, then all we need is the father to either voluntarily acknowledge the fact that he is the father. That's basically all you need, or the man to acknowledge the father. Or, as Carnell pointed out, a default ruling, default judgment can be also utilized. But the key to this whole thing is voluntary. And if you are, for example, been told by your girlfriend or your wife that you are in fact the father of your child, most men, quite frankly, are just elated to the fact that they are going to be a father. And they accept it also very willingly. And that's part of the problem. States fear the loss. I'm sorry, I wasn't ready yet. States fear the loss of federal dollars. And they also fear the loss of federal violations. And we just had a ruling come out from the Administration for Children and Families at HHS just in the last 2 weeks that contradicted this particular misinformation that's been flowing around the states here of the last several years. Mothers will, as I mentioned, mothers, I get it duplicated here, willfully withhold full disclosure of their sexual partners is the other reason it exists. Now, who are the victims? As I mentioned, it's not just men, it's children, it's relatives, particularly grandparents and aunts and uncles. We are all victims of this insidious practice. African Americans in particular and other minorities are also victimized by this because most of you may or may not realize African Americans in particular have a tremendous history and culture that's tied around family structure. And unfortunately, it wasn't until the slavery days when we were imported here in the United States that began to be torn down by others, usually slave owners. And as a result of that, paternity fraud got its start right there because we had a lot of children. I myself, somewhere in my history, I know that I am not completely African by my heritage. I can just look at myself and tell that, okay? But that's okay. But the problem is that at least when it comes to determining who our biological parents are, we should at least try to do that if the technology presents itself. And unfortunately, we are still hanging on to tenets, I believe, of the slavery era when this happens. We are separating children from their parents through divorce, we're through sole physical custody, and through paternity fraud. And these are tenets of slavery, ladies and gentlemen. So whether you like it or not, we are still doing what was done back in the days of slavery, and we needs to stop now. We bequeath family continuity through a broken lineage. You know, I think that we are all proud of our backgrounds and proud of our heritage, no matter what ethnic background we may have. But unfortunately, if that's broken because of truth not being told or not being disclosed, can you imagine a child who might be the heritage of a fortune, for example, that's not allowed to take advantage of that because the truth was withheld? This is what's wrong. And the other side happens when I mentioned that children and relatives all suffer, no matter which side of the equation you may find yourself. Mothers, see, where am I? Oh, mothers willfully withhold full disclosure of partners. I don't know what that's a second, that's probably a duplicate. Let me also, I did this in a quick hurry, I apologize. But let me also suggest to you, there's a statement that I've attributed to myself, and I'm proud of it. Because I've heard a lot of our critics and opponents talk about fatherhood going beyond biology. And you know, at first blush, all of us can think about that and say, well, yeah, that's about right. Sure, fatherhood goes beyond biology. But let me explain something. That's a misnomer. That's a mistake. That's incorrect. Fatherhood, ladies and gentlemen, is biology. Look it up in the dictionary. It talks about begetting a child. That means you are a biological father. So fatherhood really is, by definition, biology. It is, however, being a dad and a parent that goes typically or oftentimes beyond biology. All right, and I think we can agree, all of us can agree on that. So I say here to those in the media, and those in the press, and those opponents and critics who oftentimes love to jump on that particular phrase about fatherhood, I challenge you, get it right, okay? Use the right definitions, all right? And we'll all be fine. Next slide, please. So what do we need to do? We need to eliminate paternity fraud now. And frankly, here in New Jersey, the way you can do that and the way you can restore the lineage and the heritage of families, no matter what the ethnic background might be, what the culture might be, is through Assembly Bill 2374. In Michigan, it's House Bill 4120. And in some other states, I could probably name a couple of more numbers. But the key is this: about a dozen states are proceeding along this way, and thank God they are. Because this is an insidious, this is a heinous crime that should not be tolerated by anybody in the 21st century in the United States of America. So, disclosure, truth and paternity disclosure, and automatic paternity establishment at birth are some of the solutions to preventing this particular issue. Knowing, and by the way, I'm going to end with this last quote. This is a quote from, believe it or not, Paula Roberts, who is a senior attorney at the Center for Law and Social Policy, if I'm not mistaken, in Washington, D.C. And this is it's a quote directly out of her own document called Biology and Beyond, the Case for Passage of the New Uniform Parentage Act that she and her organization is trying to get adopted throughout all of the 50 states. Now let me explain something to you. This is a quote in her own introduction. If you just read it, you can see very quickly that she actually agrees with the statements that we've been making here. But the only problem is, if you read the document further through other sections, Article 3 to be exact, you will find that Ms. Roberts is really saying, okay, you have voluntary paternity establishment. Yep, we're going to do that, continue to do that. Only, by the way, we're only going to give you 2 years to find out if in fact that's true. You only have 2 years to figure out whether or not you're the biological parent, because after that point, it's all said and done. Now, I ask you for one question. If she believes this statement that I've shown you here, then you tell me, why is there a time limit at all on the truth? Why is there ever a time limit posed on anything being true? Yep. The bottom line is here: the truth is the truth. It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that's what we want to be doing. Thank you very much.
Statement and presentation from our host sponsor, and that would be Mr. Patrick McCarthy from the New Jersey Citizens Against Paternity Fraud.
This is going to be very brief. I think I can't top anything that these individuals have come up here and talked about. I think they've summed paternity fraud up quite well. One thing I would like to strongly support and get support from is other individuals in the state of New Jersey coming forward to help this legislation. We hope to have individuals that are in this room right now that I have never personally met meet with us at the end of this meeting so we can get your name, your address, put together a profile for an advertisement which we are going to put in the Newark Star Ledger showing the faces of paternity fraud victims. We need to let the legislators in this state know that this is just not about Pat McCarthy. And that's what they've posed it thus far, that it's about Pat McCarthy and 1 or 2 other individuals who this affects. We need to show the legislators and the public that this is an issue that affects many families in the state of New Jersey. Whether you happen to be a wealthy individual, a middle-class individual, or someone who is struggling on welfare, if you're a paternity fraud victim, the bill in New Jersey would help each and every one of you. Fraud is fraud, no matter how you look at it. We have got to address the issue in New Jersey, and I think once we get this bill enacted into law in New Jersey, it's going to help many other states proceed forward getting this type of legislation enacted into law. We can't stop in New Jersey, we can't stop in Georgia or Michigan. We need to proceed further and assist every state get this law enacted. We need to take this on federally. We need to go after the federal government. We have some plans in effect that are going to essentially take on the federal government and put them at risk for not enacting this type of legislation on a state level.
None other than Mr. Carnell Smith. Let's give him another hand. That's a long title.
Thank you, Eric. Checks in the mail. Well, as you've already heard, there are many dynamics to the issue about paternity fraud. There are many facets to it. There are many people affected. And I'm going to say it, no, it's not just guys trying to get out of paying child support. Let's take a look at something here before we switch slides. I'm going to read something to you out of the state and U.S. Constitution. And I want you to ask yourself, is New Jersey meeting the bill? Okay? No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property except by due process of law. Protections to person and property, equal protection, protection to person and property is the paramount duty of government, and it shall be impartial and complete. No person shall be denied the equal protection of the law. Well, then why do we even need a paternity fraud law? Because New Jersey, like so many other states, is not meeting its own state constitution, is not in compliance with the United States Constitution, and you'll find from the victims, they're saying, look, I want equal justice. I want to support my own children. But now, let me go ahead, and if you'll switch screens for me, Pastor. I want to pose a question to you today. Just imagine if you could get $250,000 tax-free and you could keep it even if you got caught. Would you sign up today? Tax-free.
Yep.
And imagine if you got caught, they'd say, well, look, next time, take more. I'm going to elaborate what that means. Making child support payments for somebody else's child in the amount of $330 a month, which is a little over $80 a week, will amount to $250,000 over 18 years. Now, I won't speak for you guys, but on $250,000, I can buy a house. I could get the paper to the house. But imagine after you made that final payment and you thought it was your house, they said, no, you can't have it. But I paid for it. I thought it was mine. And that's the same thing some of the guys are saying, that I paid her to take care of that child that I thought was mine. And I think I should be able to get back what was taken from me under misrepresentation, under deception, and under fraud. And do you know what the New Jersey courts have said and what the other courts have said? They said no. Why are we here? Goal and objective, we want to see paternity fraud stop. I believe within my heart that it can be brought to 0%. And it would be necessary if we could get 100% truth in every case about who's the baby's father, who's the child's father. Full disclosure in all cases. I think that would work. Anybody here believe that if people got the desire to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God, in every case that maybe men could make an informed decision? Release all of the paternity fraud victims, and that includes the children. Would you believe that there are adults who don't know for sure who are they related to?
That's good.
I stand before you today. If God allows me to see this coming December, I'll be 43 years old. And I've been told a man is my father. He's still alive. And I want to do a DNA test with him. Not because I question him. But you know what? If the results came back and he was not my dad, I would still love him. I would still be grateful for everything he had done. For everything he had done to help me. But you know, I'd have some words from my mother. She'd owe me an answer. And I'd say, I want to know. Even now, at 43 years old, I'd want to know who's my dad. And hopefully today there's a person that's sitting out in the audience that might want to share with you that is a recipient of one of the free DNA tests that I've given. She told me that she'd be willing to speak regardless of the results. Now, I'm not going to put her on the spot, and if she decides she wants to change when we take a break, I'm going to meet with her and I'm going to give her the results. And I hope that if she's able to, she would like to share with you why someone would want to know, who am I related to? Who are my people? Please change. Today's situation, it's an epidemic. No, it's not SARS. No, it's not anthrax. No, it's not AIDS. The epidemic is paternity fraud. And what is it doing? It is causing emotional, it is causing financial, it is causing psychological harm to men, women, and children. Next slide. But look what happens here. Many of the states, they choose to take an approach of just looking the other way. So, you know, if you pretend you don't see the truth, you know, you just kind of look the other way and pretend the problem's not there. But ladies and gentlemen, if 28 to 30% of the people who got a test, that's not everybody that was born, that's just the people who got a test, turned out to not be the biological fathers. Now that reference there, that's been quoted in the American Association of Blood Bank. They do a study each year on all of the labs that they accredit, and they ask those labs to report how many did you test and how many were not related as they had been informed. Ask yourself this question. Would a guy take the test if he knew he was not the father? Most of the people that we've been in touch with, they take the test because they had been told they were the father, and at some point somebody gave them an implication or indication rather that they might not be the father. Next slide. What is paternity fraud? This is only one definition. Pay close attention to the next few slides. When the mother of a child purports that a man is the biological father of a child, without telling him, without telling the government officials, and sometimes she doesn't even tell the court that somebody else could be the kid's father. Next definition. Did you know that some of the courts have actually forced the mother to lie when she wanted to tell the truth? Now, what was that part about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing about the truth, so help me? Maybe we should swear a few judges in. Maybe we should swear in a few of the legal community. Swear them in. Sometimes the boyfriend and the mother conspire together to cut the actual father out of the picture. And they go so far as to falsify the birth certificate. Now, I got to ask this question. Is it unreasonable for every child to have the truth on their birth certificate and be able to rely on it? Is it unreasonable that the child should be able to see their birth certificate and say, that's my family? I'm not saying that people who've been adopted should not love the people who've helped care and raise them. They do. But many of them will spend a large portion of their life looking for, who are my people? Who's my family? Where did I come from? Next slide. Truth should be the standard. Unfortunately, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is not really what they're after. Now, this is a very simple question out here on the screen right now. How many states do you think are found to require a full and complete truthful disclosure of facts from the mother to the alleged father?
0.
0.
1.
1.
Ah.
Nada. Zip. None. In fact, that's an open challenge. Please, you can let Patrick know, you can let Dianna know, you can let me and Murray and the rest of us know. If you find one, please let us know. What you will find on the contrary is that if a person lies or falsifies documents to a government agency or to a private agency in the pursuit of funds or services, there are criminal statutes, even in New Jersey, to deal with that one. If you apply for welfare saying you have 3 kids while you actually have 1 kid, a dog, and a cat, and you get caught at it, that's called welfare fraud. If you apply for benefits on someone else's Social Security, oh, well, you know, he makes more money than Joey, so I'm going to say it was his kid. I'm going to show you a case what happened to someone who got caught at that one. Next slide. Where is it being practiced? Everywhere. No state is exempt. No person is exempt. Even people who have taken a vow of chastity, they've said that, I will abstain. I don't do that. Well, guess what? Someone can put your name down. And there is really nothing you can do when you go to a court and you say, Your Honor, I do not know this person. And I will take a test and I'll pay for it. We have a case here in New Jersey where a man fought 4 years against a default judgment. And guess what? He finally won. But he had to go to the Court of Appeals to win. And with legal costs exceeding $200 an hour in some cases to get the kind of legal power that you need. And I'm not talking about people who barely got out of law school. I'm talking about people who understand that when they represent your case in the Superior Court, they need to be planning and strategizing toward bringing this up on appeal, getting all of the pertinent facts into the record, getting all of those things in so that you will be able to appeal. But if you get someone who's not aware of those facts, your attorney can blow your case for you. Next slide. Here's what some of the courts are saying. The United States Supreme Court. Chief Justice Brennan said, in the field of contested paternity, the truth is so often obscured is because social pressure. Oh, we don't want people to tell the truth. Oh. Social pressure creates a conspiracy of silence. So if you don't ask me, I won't tell. Did you know there was someone else that could be the baby's father based on you having relationships with more than one person? But if that question is not asked, what is the answer you will get? Silence. Or worse, induce deliberate falsity. Come on, let's break it down. Some people are lying on purpose. Some people are lying accidentally. That's the difference between perjury and misrepresentation. Next slide. Fathers say why they don't want to pay. There's a study done, and the Office of Child Support Enforcement from the national level said the #1 reason men said they couldn't pay was because they didn't have the money. Do you understand, with a depressed economy where many people are being laid off in the thousands, they can't meet a child support obligation based on no income? What about the men said that, wait a minute, I don't mind paying, but can I see the kid? Can I see the kid that I pay to support? And what do they say? I'm not allowed to visit the kid. And the same court that will hold men hostage and tell them, well, the fact that they're not related doesn't matter, is the same court that will not allow that man to see the child. And then this 12% number, they say they're not the father. Next slide. Here's what another of the United States Supreme Court said. The value of the blood test is what? Is a wholesome aid in the quest for truth. I'm not going to bore you and read the rest of this, but I'm going to stop right here and ask you, is the state of New Jersey meeting what its own state constitution says? See, it's not a black issue. It's not a white issue. At this point, when the issue is paternity fraud, it has become a case of gender bias against males. Mothers have up to 18 years old to establish and set paternity. And in many cases, they can go back for payments all the way back to when that guy didn't even know the child existed. Now, how can it be equal justice if she can get 18 years to establish the order, the guy can get 60 days in an unwed, non-marital situation to challenge? And if you ask the guy, did you know that there was someone else involved? How's he going to know that in 60 days? If you told him up front, dude, you were one of the possible fathers. You were number 3. Oh, well, how did you know it was me? Well, see, you make more money than the other 4. Now, we should not allow father shopping. But right now, I'm going to bring up to you, and I want you, please, to give a hand as we get ready to have you listen to the man who wrote the song called Real Life, in the person of a marital paternity fraud victim, Mr. Michael Huff.
Good Good afternoon, everybody. Is that better? Mr. Carnell Smith and the rest of you that has spoken here this evening is, to open one's eyes is an understatement. He's certainly opened mine ever since I met him. I've heard it said by men much greater than myself that triumph is born of tragedy. This is the case with the song Real Life. It was conceived from the womb of lies and deceit, and the story it recounts takes you from one of the most beautiful moments of God's creation, the birth of a child, all the way down to the depths of hell. The song itself lasts a little less than 4 minutes, but the pain it describes lasts a lifetime. I was asked to be here today to tell my story, and I'm happy to do so, but this is not just a story, it's the truth. It's my truth, and it's the truth of men all over America. I myself did not realize that there were so many other fathers that had been stripped of their roles and rights like I was. I had no idea how often paternity, children being torn from their loved ones, men being left without rights, was such a huge issue until I met Mr. Smith. When the day came for the birth of my child, at the time I of course thought it was my child, it was just as normal as anyone else's, as you can imagine. The friends and family, grandparents were all gathered around, making the great comparison, as everybody usually does. It was finally decided that she had my eyes and nose and her hair, smile, and ears. Typical baby scene played out thousands of times a day across the country. "18 months later, I found out she wasn't mine. I got a letter in the mail. One sentence at the bottom says I was excluded from being the father of that child. It took me 10 years to write the song because it was too close, it was too painful. Just couldn't do it. But when I did, it was a form of self-therapy. Kept me from losing my sanity. It was something that when it did come, it was really a wonderful thing, and I want to thank David Staten for singing it and bringing life to it. Chip Martin, who lives in Nashville, for his musical abilities, and I want to thank God for helping me through the situation, because without him I wouldn't be here today. And most of all, Carnell and Vincent, because without them I wouldn't have the knowledge that I have, and I wouldn't be able to at least do this little bit, hopefully to help in some way, to play my small part. Thank you. And this is David Staten.
The day you were born was no different than most. Family and friends, flowers and toasts. I was as proud as a father could be when I looked at you and saw a part of me. But your mom had a secret deep in her soul, a terrible truth she hoped I'd never know. And I cursed the day I learned the fact that you've been conceived behind my back. It's hard to believe on some movie of the week, so far-fetched and hard to believe. I never had thought it could happen to me, but it was real life, and nothing I could do change. Real life that left me here wondering who to blame. Now I'm a stranger in these family photographs with you. real life that left me here wondering who to blame. Now I'm a stranger in these family photographs with you. Real life, how could you be? How could you be so cool? It was real life.
The very first song that he sang brought tears to my eyes. I'm not a victim, but my brother was a victim of paternity fraud. And it just really, really touched me, you know what I mean? So I want to say you did a wonderful job, and it's a bad thing that you had to go through the pain that you went through, but it was a good thing because you're going to bless so many people with the music that you wrote. You know, I'm so grateful just to be here and be a part of such a wonderful, wonderful organization. Right now we're going to bring to you none other than one of the members of the Dads of Michigan, and he's also with the clergy and paternity. He's also clergy and paternity fraud victim, and his name is none other than Reverend Edwin Mack. Let's give him a hand, can we?
Forgive me if I act like I'm at church. I rise to give honor to the Holy Father, the King of all Israel within me. Thanking the great and mighty God of Israel for all his goodness, all his mercy that he has bestowed upon each and every one of us, and thanking him for his son, Christ Jesus. I've been touched by the young man singing, and everything that I have heard has been beautiful. And I am a victim of everything they talked about. And my heart goes out for the one that have went through what you're going through like me. When I went through my divorce, I want you to know I still love those children. When I found out my oldest daughter that I thought was mine, I told her that I wasn't her father when I got the results back. She cried. I cried. We embraced one another, just hugged one another, just shaking and crying. But I told her, I said, no matter what, I had signed the papers and everything. I had to pay. I'm still paying. But I told her, because I was thinking I would be able to get the case opened back up. I said, whatever you need, call me. That's what I told my oldest daughter that I thought was mine. I found out that she wasn't mine. I'll help you do anything you need to do. I even offered to send her to a psychiatrist if she needed help in that way, because I didn't want them to wait until they were 16 or 17 to find out that I wasn't their biological father. I went through all of that, and I tried to get my case opened back up. I went to court, and the judge didn't want to hear it. But the reason why I had my children tested was this. A young man called me. I wasn't at home. He left a message on my answer machine telling me that that boy that I thought was mine was his. That's how I found out. And by receiving that phone call, and I knew the young man, he belonged to one of our other churches. I had tests did on all three of the children. And that's when I found out the oldest child wasn't even mine. The second child was, and the third child wasn't. I named that young man after my father. If I had known he wasn't mine, would I have did it? I don't think so. But I still love them. They comes over to the house now. The oldest child don't, but the young boy do, rides his back. And of course, my child, you know she comes. But I still love them all and still willing to help them. But you know who need help now? Me. I need help.
Yep.
I pay almost $400 a week. Some of that money is for 2 children that's not mine. I don't mind taking care of my own children. But what I don't lack, I can't do anything about it. But I'm still fighting this right now in the court system, and it's costing me a lot of money. And if it wasn't for the money that I was getting for passing the church, I wouldn't even be able to pay my rent. I pray to God that I don't get thrown out of church, because I wouldn't have nowhere to go but to some of my people. We need to do something to change these laws. Many people is suffering because of things like this. And this place should be full of men.
Yep.
Maybe not that many women, but this place, it shouldn't even be enough room in here.
Yep.
A lot of men is victims, just like me, and some of them don't know it yet.
Yeah.
Some of them is taking care of somebody else's children and don't know it yet. But this place should be full of men, because we have children. Even the young man, the boy that I'm raising, that I'm taking care of now, I'm paying for. I wouldn't want to see him go through what I'm going through, because it's a hurting thing.
Yep.
To find out, you know, all these years, I was at the hospital when they was born into the world, looking at her hair of them, looking at the doctor pull them out, and then find out they ain't none of mine. How you think I feel?
Well, people, you heard just a little bit about what happens in real life to real people, not just people trying to get out of paying child support. We're about to make a transition in the program right now so that you might hear from real people who have walked through this journey in real life. And some of them are willing to share some very personal things with you. Now, Patrick, you had a list of people that you've invited to come. I want you to come back up and stand with me. And are you okay with it? Okay. Part of what we did in working on this real life project, and we defined this as Operation Social Impact. We've heard from a whole lot more people than you see here in this room. We had commitments from people. Okay, all right. We had commitments from a very large number of people. And we decided that we would, in order to show people that it affects more people than you would imagine, there are adults who are children who want to know the truth. And one of those people I awarded a free DNA test to, a fully legally binding test. I took care of all the arrangements between this state here in Trenton, and in Newark, and then we got the other one done in North Carolina to help a young lady who said something to me. She said it was so persuasive. She said, I have a right to know. And I can say in my heart, amen to that sister, that she deserves to know the truth. A gentleman who couldn't be here today, he is the Assistant Director of U.S. Citizens Against Paternity Fraud, and he found out at age 16 that the man who had raised him was not his biological father. And he still wanted to know who his father was. And his mother refused to tell him. He eventually found his father. He quit school and joined the United States Army during the Vietnam era because he found out his dad was in the Army. He got there in time just to find out that his dad got killed in action. Guess who brought his father home? The young man who joined the Army to look for his father, and he was the person that brought his dad home. The dad he never got to talk to. The dad he never got a chance to say, you're my dad. Right now I'm going to ask you to please give a hand to a very brave lady in the person of Miss Lakeisha Harris, who is the recipient of one of the free DNA tests by For Truth Identity. Please come join us now, Miss Harris.
I would like to say thank you, Carnell, and your wife. And I got my results. Carnell just gave them to me, and I didn't know how I would react. I had already made the decision that I would not disclose it to anybody, except for one of my coworkers, and I promised her because she had been so supportive, and she doesn't know me, you know, my family, my father. But like Carnell said, I said I had the right to know. For 31, I'm 31, and this great woman raised me. She had me since I was about 2 weeks old. My mother was a teenager. She was 13 when she conceived me. And my father was about 16. And my grandmother raised me. I never seen my mother much. My father was in and out of trouble, and it was just my grandmother who raised me. And when I got about 18, someone started talking in the family about this secret about me and who my biological father was. And the name came about, and I became very interested. And I said, oh, I grew up in Warren County, if anybody's familiar with New Jersey. I grew up in Warren County, and my family had come from Essex County in Newark. So I was living in a totally different world from Essex County. I was so removed from whatever was going on. And I had this name of this gentleman, and I came to Newark, and I found him within a day. On my own, and I searched, and I found him within a day, and I contacted him. And the first thing I said to him, I introduced myself. I asked him, did he recall a woman, my mother's name I gave him, from 1972, and he said yes, he remembered her. And there was complete silence, and he said to me, oh my God, Keisha, where have you been all these years? And I said, you know of me? And he says, yes, you're my daughter. I've never forgot you. I've always thought about you. I remembered your birthday. And he said, the last time I seen you, you were about 2 years old. And that was that. He was so excited. He wanted to see me. I was excited to know I had sisters and brothers. And I made that trip from Warren County back to Newark the next day to meet with him and his family. And they were all excited to see me. And just like, it was like being born all over again. People wanted to come and say, oh, you have his eyes. Oh, you have his face. And, you know, I was so excited. I thought, oh, my goodness. But it was a secret that this woman was well off. My grandmother came from the South, and she was a child of a sharecropper. And somehow they came into a little bit of money, was able to go to Warren County and build this beautiful home. And she had lovely property there. So it was best that my teenage mother give me up to this woman, although they all knew that I was not her son's child. Although this test revealed that I may be indeed that man's child. Because the gentleman who knew about me all those years, according to this test, is not my biological father. And it's important to me that I know because my mother is deceased. The gentleman who raised me as his daughter, he's deceased. My grandmother is deceased. When I ask family members about this secret, they say the people you need to ask are no longer here. So I thought, my goodness. And my father's not well. And I would hate for him to pass away without me knowing the truth. I think now my search may go on to find out who my biological father is because I need to know and I have a right to know. My children have a right to know. I thought I would be angry at my mother for not telling the truth in the beginning, but she was one of 12. Her mom lived in the housing projects in Newark, and I know it was pretty rough. And I understand that she gave me up, and she told, I don't know if it was a lie or if they all came together with an agreement for me to go with this woman. But I thank her. I would not be who I am and where I am today had it not been for this woman. I'm going to end now because I have to rush and go pick up my father. My daddy, he's flying in. Our whole family's flying in from North Carolina. And they all agreed that it would be okay if I not share with them the outcome. And what I'm going to do is, I asked Carnell the time, it was 4:30 when he gave it to me. As of today, I'm going to start a journal. And I'm going to log down at exactly 4:30 this piece of paper was handed to me. And when I leave this earth, when my children go through my belongings, they will know at that point that that man was not my biological father. But it doesn't matter, because I love him anyway. And I think he's fed me enough and loved me enough that his ways have rubbed off on me. And I look like him, and I look like my sisters. And so it doesn't matter. I thought I would cry. And I know I can't cry because I have to go to the airport to pick him up, and that'll give it away. So I just have to be strong. And, you know, I have a 10-year-old brother, and he's really worried. And if he asks me, I'm just tell him, you know, I'm your sister. We look just alike.
Mm-hmm. God bless you.
Thank you.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just men trying to get out of paying child support. People want to know the truth. And at this part, we're going to turn this portion of the town hall meeting in for those who have come as guests of Patrick and others who would have comments they would love to share. I'm going to ask Patrick at this point that he would introduce those people and ask them to come up, that you might share 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
As Carnell spoke earlier about a number of individuals who did contact me that would be here, people who, from the inception of my organization, have gotten in touch with me. There are 3 individuals who showed up today, and I thank them for coming forward. One of them had to leave earlier, Julian Richards. He had to pick up someone in his family, which I completely understand. There are 2 other people here, a guy by the name of Rich Eaton and another gentleman by the name of Gary Adeline, I hope I said that right, who are here, and I would love to have them come up and give a few brief statements about their individual situation. If they don't feel comfortable doing it, that's fine. However, I think in lieu of what you've seen here today, everyone's in the same boat, and it affects everyone and everyone's family the same way. Rich, would you like to come on up? Gary, go ahead, come on up. Rich Eaton?
Hi, my name is Rich Eaton. It's nice to see that there are other people such as myself. I've personally been on both sides of this child support issue. Gaining custody of my 2 children, they're very small babies, and a New Jersey judge ordered my ex-wife to pay $25 a week for 2 kids. We all know it's pretty much a joke. Never dime one collected on that case, though. I got 20 years of court orders for me being subpoenaed in court on that. Then on the other side, you get the fraud thing here, where I've been on the other side of the dime. And this one really, it's worse than the first because it does destroy me. I got 5 other kids, and it's a tough situation. But I hope through diligence and meetings and people and drawing attention to it, we can change this so other people don't have to experience the pain that we have all been through.
God bless you, brother. You are not alone.
Good afternoon, and that's the truth. You are not alone. Gary Adeline, retired Jersey City firefighter. This is still pretty emotional to me. I had 2 children born in marriage, and both are not biologically mine. I learned this a month before I was remarried. My daughter was 13 and my son 8. My story goes way longer than 2 minutes, and I know that's what but I feel everybody's hurt. I live through it every day, and like the Reverend said, it hurts. Great song.
Thank you, guys, and there are some other individuals I see in the room that I am not aware of. If you'd like.
We don't want to deny anyone the opportunity that if you had some comments that you wanted to share. I hope that you can see today that this issue goes across race. It is not a black man issue. It is not a white man issue. There are people who are of various backgrounds and nationalities. At this point, from the U.S. Citizens Against Paternity Fraud, we have Asian paternity fraud victims. We have Jewish paternity fraud victims. We have, Reverend Mack is not the only pastor that's a paternity fraud victim. We have several of them. We have attorneys. We have commissioned officers, non-commissioned officers. We have enlisted men. My own son Carnell Smith Jr., who is a member of the United States Marine Corps, who is currently in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's on the front line, scared to death. But before he left, I told him, I said, son, you need to watch out for something that will happen to men in your unit. Is that in the local neighborhood, people understand that if you can get a paternity judgment against a military man, I won't sing it, but you've heard the song, We're in the Money, right? That means base privileges, that means access to medical, that means an allotment check, extra money, and guess what? And if he dies and doesn't make it back, that means an insurance settlement and access to the man's Social Security, and he is not the biological father. I warned my son and I said, son, you need to be exceedingly careful. But there's no defense to someone putting your name down. When they know your first name, they know your last name, and they know the position of the military. When men have told me their commanding officer says, son, we believe in taking care of these kids, and you're going to sign these papers or I'm going to take you out back and forget I'm an officer. Do you understand that those men will sign anything under those conditions? Do you understand that a person who doesn't have all of the facts can be misled into signing a document? And for the marital man, who is willing to say to a pastor, a moral leader, that it is unreasonable for him to believe that the children born during his marriage are his? And in one of the cases that we found doing case law search here in New Jersey, a man found out that he was not the biological father of all 3 children born during the marriage because he, without an operation, cannot have kids. He did not find out until the second marriage when the second wife could not get pregnant. And the court said, didn't matter. The second wife eventually was able to get pregnant because he had the expensive surgery to reconnect the missing pathway that would allow the necessary components to get out to make that result happen. Was that a G-rated definition? But what he didn't understand, as so many of us, we didn't understand. When I go to the courtroom, they ask me to swear.
You could say, well, Mr. Davis, you could probably have another child, another son. That perhaps would be true with one exception. When my ex-wife had my son, the youngest child, we had agreed with her consent for me to undergo a vasectomy. So that was 15 years ago. So consequently, for me to continue my lineage and my family, it would be difficult, if not impossible. So please, keep that in mind. That paternity fraud has victims beyond generations.
No.
We stand before you now, a diverse, concerned group of people who want to see truth be the standard in the family court, as it should be in the criminal court when DNA is used consistently again and again and has freed over 100, you listen to me carefully, over 100 people who had been falsely accused of murder, falsely accused of rape, and the truth was the standard that set them free. And in the Bible, there's a verse, St. John 8:32, and it says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. The call to action to you people that are here, that were willing to share of your time to come and listen to us share information with you, is number one, be concerned enough to get involved. Be concerned enough to ensure that this doesn't happen to your friend's son, your neighbor's son. God, hope it never happens to you. See, selfish motivation might be just enough to get it done for some people. That need to survive, that might be enough to get it done for some people. But when you hear about what many of us have endured And right now, I love this little girl who I raised from birth. And when her mother saw the test results, she says, you can't see her anymore. But you still better have my money here. Do you understand that her concern wasn't even about the emotional well-being of the child? Do you understand that the court told me I didn't have any rights, so I couldn't insist to see the child? And yet today, 3 years later, I have not even seen the child, even by accidental contact. There is a part of my heart that still aches for her, because she's been a part of our family, real life. The call to action is that if you would take the challenge and fill out our evaluation form, we would love to hear your feedback on what transpired today. Your feedback is openly encouraged, and in turn for you, okay, and in turn for you completing that form, I'd love to present you one of the no fraud shirts that says every child deserves the truth. Whether it is a young child or it's a 31-year-old child, every child deserves the truth. And then the photographer would like to take a photo of everyone that is present. Would you be willing to come up here and join us?
Line up against this wall.
Okay, line up against that wall. And then would you please take the evaluation form? That'll allow us to connect you with the New Jersey Citizens Against Paternity Fraud president and founder, Mr. Patrick McCarthy. Where's Patrick?
He's got your back.
Because what Patrick needs is for the legislators in the Assembly and in the Senate to understand it's not just Patrick that's affected. Guess what? It is not just Caucasian males that are affected. It can happen to the legislators. It can happen to the judges. And I'm almost tempted to say, you know, if I wasn't so honest, I'd wonder if we could get somebody to put one of the judges' names down and send it to the wrong address. But see, I'm honest, so I wouldn't do that. I would not do that. Now, and I hope this is not me inciting somebody else to do that. But if they had to experience what it was like trying to get justice out of a system that is not concerned about justice, they're highly focused on the money. Would that be a wake-up call in New Jersey? Thank you for your coming.
Get somebody moving in the front here.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you complete the evaluation form, please, you can have a shirt. Did I say that in a Jersey type accent or something? I mean, I don't know.
Well, you gotta say it a lot faster. You gotta say it faster than most of them are all one word. That sentence is like one word.
So it's like one syllable.
Where a man tries to go and get a DNA test to prove the truth, and they don't allow him to
As
do
a
it.
problem.
So
So
that's
he could get a DNA test.
correct. First and foremost, it would allow him to get a DNA test. And then the second thing it would do is if that DNA test proved that he was not the biological father, he would therefore be relieved of his child support obligations. They would be a court order. And from that point forward, it's his choice to support the
If he
child.
wants to
That's
or
correct.
not.
And in many of these cases, you have to understand, these aren't always married cases. These are also what are called COP, certificate of parentage, when a single mother comes forward and names a father to this child. Unbeknownst to him, many times he's named as a father without even knowing it. The only time he finds out is all of a sudden his check is garnished. And then he finds out that he's got a child out there. And at this point, it's too late for him to go forward and disprove with DNA that this child is not his. And that would also overturn those cases. It would allow men to come forward and get the truth.
So bottom line, they could get a DNA test, and if they're not the biological father,
Right.
they're relieved of their child's
Correct.
Okay. Anything else major in this bill?
No, I mean, and it does go, I don't want to say one step further, but it also, in cases like with mine, where my child is now 19 and I still consider her my daughter, unless I set up my will to say so, which I'm in the process of doing, if I were to be in an accident, my ex-wife and my daughter can essentially come forward and attack my estate. Okay, so that's the other thing this would do. It would allow for the estate to be settled. You know, an individual's estate. And
So that if it's not a biological child, the child would automatically
be cut out of that.
be cut out of
That's
estates.
correct.
Okay.
And I think I feel very confident once we get this through the assembly, it's gonna be a law. Now, we had this bill, my wife and I actually personally, by ourselves, got this through the Senate and the Assembly on Governor DeFrancesco's administration, got it to Governor DeFrancesco's desk. Got to his desk 3 weeks prior to him leaving office, and put a CB up, conditional veto. The Assembly and the Senate didn't have time to concur on the amendments because it happened in the final days of his administration. And Trenton's complete chaos, so the bill died.
Ah.
So we're
Okay, so you're
starting
back to
all
square
over.
one. What about the indications from McGreevy?
Well, they've kind of given it to, well, let's see if we can get it through both houses. But
And then we'll talk.
But we do have some indication from some people on his staff that they support the